Tonight, we journey far back in time, long before electric lights or glowing screens, to a world illuminated only by candle flames and the hush of the wind through the trees. The year is 1712, and the October chill has settled deep into the bones of the New England colonies. The air smells of burning pine, and behind every shuttered window, firelight dances across the walls like whispers of something ancient waiting to be remembered. This is a Halloween night in Colonial America, a story of mystery, superstition, and quiet courage beneath a harvest moon that watches silently from above. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Wrap yourself in a blanket. Let your room fall still, and let the sound of my voice carry you back in time. If you're tuning in from the US, Europe, Asia, or anywhere across the world, welcome. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. I love knowing where these stories find their way, whether it's midnight in London, an autumn evening in New York, or a foggy morning somewhere across the sea. Now take a deep breath, settle in, and let's drift together into the haunting stillness of a colonial Halloween night. The final light of day had vanished behind the endless pines as the small settlement of Hawthorne Hollow prepared for All Hallows' Eve. Wooden chimneys released thin curls of smoke that reached for the silver sky like ghostly fingers. The air carried the scent of sweet corn husks and apple wood burning. Children's laughter echoed faintly between the cottages, though even their joy held a trace of unease, for this was the night when the veil between worlds was said to grow thin. Inside a modest cabin at the edge of town, Martha Ellery, 19 years old, stood by the hearth, her hands trembling slightly as she hung bundles of dried herbs above the door. Her mother always said the scent of sage and rosemary kept wandering spirits at bay. Through the window, Martha could see the path leading to the old meeting house, dark, silent, and framed by bare, reaching branches. Somewhere in that stillness, an owl called. Its cry rose through the air like a question unanswered. The fire popped softly, painting the ceiling beams in flickering orange light. Her father had not yet returned from the neighboring farm, and every passing minute drew her closer to the window. Each moving shadow seemed a figure, each whisper of wind, a footstep. Halloween in Hawthorne Hollow was not a night taken lightly. The darkness had thickened into velvet black when Martha finally wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The wind brushed her cheeks like a cold hand, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant smoke. In the far distance, lanterns flickered along the main road, where neighbors were still walking home from the harvest feast. The moon hung low and pale, half veiled by thin clouds drifting slowly across the sky. Beneath her feet, fallen leaves softened the ground. Each step made a soft crunch, like whispers beneath her shoes. Behind her, a door creaked open, then closed. Martha froze, listening. Only the wind murmured through the trees, and somewhere far away, a dog barked. She followed the narrow trail that cut through the woods, the same path her father always took from the next farm over. She had walked it countless times before, but tonight it felt changed, as if the forest itself had shifted while she wasn't looking. The trees leaned inward, their trunks black in the moonlight. Their tangled branches arched above her, weaving a tunnel of shadows. The air smelled faintly of rotting apples mingled with sharp pine. Every so often, a breeze stirred the leaves, making them shimmer like coins in the dim light. Martha pulled her shawl tighter and whispered a prayer, one her mother had taught her, for protection from unseen spirits and restless souls. But then, just beyond the edge of hearing, came the faint rhythm of footsteps, matching her own. She stopped. The forest held its breath. Her heart thudded softly beneath her shawl. The only sound was the sigh of wind moving through the brittle branches above. And then, there it was again, the slow, deliberate crunch of leaves close behind her. Martha turned, lifting her lantern high. Its glow cut through the mist, revealing only drifting vapors between the trees, pale and thin, like breath in the cold air. The path behind her lay empty, curling into darkness, yet she could not shake the feeling that something unseen was listening. "Mr. Ellery," she called softly, her voice trembling. Her words broke the silence like a fragile thread, and when they faded, the woods grew even quieter. No one answered. Martha forced herself forward, one step, then another. The lantern's light danced along the trail, glinting off damp stones and fallen acorns. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination. Maybe a deer, or the echo of her own steps in the still air. But then it came again. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Her pulse quickened. The old stories her grandmother used to tell began to stir in her mind. Tales of lost souls wandering the woods on Halloween night, searching for warmth, for light, for someone to follow home. And though Martha told herself she didn't believe such things, she still whispered, "Please, whoever you are, stay back." The wind rose again, brushing past her ear like a whisper. For a moment, she thought she heard her own name carried on it, soft, distant. But when she turned, the path behind her was empty. Her breathing grew shallow as she pressed forward, the glow of her lantern trembling through the trees like a tiny, uncertain star. The forest felt alive now, alive in a way that watched her. Shadows shifted differently, and every gust of wind carried a voice that almost sounded human. Almost. Soon, she reached the small wooden bridge that crossed the stream, the spot where her father always paused to rest on his way home. The water below ran narrow but loud, swollen from recent rain. It shimmered silver under the moonlight, curling around stones smooth as old bones. As Martha lifted her lantern, she froze. Across the bridge, another light glowed faintly through the mist. It hung low, swaying just above the ground, as if someone were holding it, yet no figure could be seen. The light was strange, not the warm orange of a candle flame, but a cold, ghostly white that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Her mouth went dry. "Father?" she whispered, barely louder than the murmur of the stream. The lantern across the water didn't move. It simply hovered there, flickering, its reflection trembling in the current below. Cautiously, Martha stepped closer. The bridge creaked under her shoes, and her breath rose like smoke in the cold night air. Then, without warning, the pale light flickered once, twice, and vanished. Darkness closed in around her like a door. The forest fell silent. Only the restless whisper of the stream remained. Her pulse pounded in her neck. For an instant, she thought of turning back. But something deep inside her, whether fear or courage, pushed her forward. She crossed the bridge toward the place where the strange light had been. The air there smelled faintly of smoke and something older, like damp stone and iron. Then she noticed something on the ground, barely visible in the dim glow of her lantern. A footprint. She crouched down slowly, her lantern trembling in her hand. The light quivered across the print, revealing its shape in chilling detail. It was large, bare, and deeply pressed into the soft earth beside the stream. The toes were long and uneven, as if whoever made it had been standing there only moments before. The water rippled nearby, catching the moonlight. The faint sound of the stream licking at the stones filled her ears, and somewhere beyond the trees, an owl called out. Every sound seemed sharper now, each one amplified by the fear rising in her chest. She reached out, her hand shaking, and hovered her fingers just above the print. The soil was still damp, still sinking slightly, as if the weight had only just lifted. Whoever it was still close. Then she smelled it. Faint, but clear. A mix of wood smoke and something sweet, almost metallic. It wasn't her father's tobacco or the earthy scent of any farmer she knew. It was stranger, older, a smell that didn't belong to anything she could name. Her eyes darted through the fog, searching. The forest across the stream loomed thick and dark, branches twisting upward like fingers reaching toward the sky. Every shadow seemed to hold shape. Every tree seemed to breathe. She took a step back, heart hammering in her chest. "Who's there?" she called softly. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, from deep within the mist, came a sound. Soft, deliberate, almost like laughter. Not loud enough to echo, but close enough that she felt it run down her spine. Her lantern flickered. The flame bent sharply to one side, though the air was perfectly still. She looked down again. The footprint was gone. The mud was smooth, untouched. A cold jolt of panic surged through her. She stumbled backward, clutching her shawl to her chest, and began to hurry down the path toward the village. The forest seemed to close behind her. The mist coiled around her ankles like fingers, tugging her backward as she ran. Her steps quickened until the soft earth gave way to the firmer ground of the main road. Ahead, she saw the first faint lights of the village, warm glows through the fog like tiny stars scattered across the dark. Relief and unease tangled together in her chest. The village was quiet, too quiet for Halloween night. Usually laughter and fiddle music spilled from the meeting hall, where the townsfolk shared cider and stories by the fire. But tonight, only silence drifted through the air. The air felt heavy, almost expectant, as if something unseen had passed through just before her. She walked past the blacksmith's shed, its door hanging open, the scent of coal long gone. The church bell tower rose against the sky, its iron bell still and dark. A single candle flickered in the apothecary's window, the flame bending with each breath of wind. Martha slowed as she reached the corner near the tavern, listening. Somewhere faintly, she thought she heard murmurs, low voices speaking behind shuttered windows. But when she turned toward the sound, it stopped. Only the creak of a swinging sign broke the silence above her head. It read, "The Copper Lantern," though tonight its lantern was dark. She drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders and glanced toward the meeting hall at the end of the road. Through its windows, she could see faint figures moving, tall, slow silhouettes drifting through the glow. Maybe the harvest feast was still going on. Maybe the quiet was all in her mind. But as she walked closer, something about those movements felt wrong. Too slow, too heavy, like boots dragging across wooden boards. And the light inside seemed dimmed, blurred by smoke. She stopped at the door, her hand hovering over the handle, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. Then came a sound that froze her blood. A knock, but not from the door before her. From the other side, from inside, as if something within was asking to be let out. Martha's fingers hovered just above the cold iron handle. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, echoing through the heavy oak. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Each one hollow, like knuckles rapping on a coffin. Her throat tightened. She glanced down the street, hoping someone else had heard, but the village was empty, wrapped in its uneasy silence. The wind had gone still. Even the trees at the edge of town stood frozen beneath the pale moonlight. She whispered a shaky prayer, then pressed her ear against the door. Inside, there was no laughter, no fiddle music, just the faint creak of floorboards and the soft, rhythmic brush of something moving against the walls. Gathering what courage she could, Martha lifted her lantern and pushed the door open. It groaned loudly, the sound rolling through the hall like thunder through a hollow canyon. The smell hit her first. Smoke, candle wax, and something else. Sour, metallic. The room was dim, lit only by a few dying candles along the long wooden table. The remains of the harvest feast still lay scattered: hard bread, spilled cider, chairs pushed back in uneven angles, but not a single soul was there. She stepped inside, her shoes clicking softly against the planks. The floor felt sticky beneath her soles. The air was thick, stale, as though no one had breathed it in hours. Then, behind her, the door shut on its own. The sound echoed through the empty room. Martha spun around, her lantern shaking. "Is someone here?" she called, her voice breaking the silence like glass. No reply. Only the faint swing of the door settling into place. Then above her head, it came again. The same 3 knocks, this time from the ceiling. For a long, trembling moment, she couldn't move. Her eyes lifted slowly toward the rafters, where the shadows gathered thick as ink. The old beams creaked under unseen weight. Dust drifted lazily through the lantern's glow. Then, knock, knock. Louder now from directly above the table. It was heavy, deliberate, like someone crawling slowly across the beams. Martha's breath hitched. She raised her lantern higher. At first there was nothing, only cobwebs and shadows. Then, movement. A flicker of pale color disappearing into the dark. She stumbled back, her heel catching a chair leg. The wooden scrape echoed like a shout. The knocking stopped. Silence fell, deep and absolute. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Who's up there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer. She forced herself to look up again, scanning every inch of the rafters. Nothing moved, but the air felt alive, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then came another sound on Burgal, not knocking, but dripping, slow, steady. A drop fell from the beam above and landed on the table with a faint patter. Then another, and another. She stepped closer, holding her lantern up with shaking hands. Her stomach turned cold. The drops weren't water. They were thick, red, fresh. Her gaze climbed upward, and she saw it. Hanging from the beam, half hidden in shadow, was the shape of a man. His skin was pale, his eyes wide open and empty, his body limp from a rope tied around his neck. The rope creaked faintly as he swayed, knocking gently, knock, 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 against the wood above. The lantern almost slipped from her hand. Its light danced wildly across the rafters, casting the figure in flickering orange and shadow. For an instant, it looked as though he moved, as though he was still alive. But when she blinked, he was still again. The faint sway came only from the breath she'd drawn in panic. Her pulse roared in her ears. She backed away, one slow step at a time, her skirt brushing overturned chairs and cold plates. The air had changed, sharper now, heavy with the metallic tang of blood. She wanted to scream, but her voice stuck in her throat like a knot. "Father," she whispered, though she knew the body above couldn't be him. It was too tall, too broad. The boots were old, the coat rough and woolen. Whoever it was had been dead for hours, maybe longer. Then, another sound. This time not from above, but from the far side of the hall. A low, dragging scrape. Something heavy being pulled across the floor. Her eyes darted toward the dark corner near the fireplace. The shadows there were thick, darker than anywhere else in the room. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, inching closer. Her lantern flickered, its flame bending as though something unseen brushed past it. The door behind her stayed closed, sealed tight as if nailed shut. She wanted to run. Every muscle screamed to run. But the movement by the hearth held her still. The darkness seemed to shift. to rise, to breathe. Then, out of that thick shadow, came a whisper, so faint she almost thought it came from inside her own head. He was the first. Her heart stopped. Who? She stammered. Who's there? The whisper came again, closer this time, circling her like smoke. The first to open the door, when they knocked. The lantern flickered once, twice, and went out. The hall plunged into blackness. For a few heartbeats, there was nothing, no light, no movement, not even sound. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until it feels alive. Martha stood frozen, clutching the cold handle of her unlit lantern. The smell of oil lingered in the air, mingled with the heavy scent of wax and blood. She couldn't see her own hand before her face. The darkness was so complete it erased the world around her. She listened, really listened, for anything beyond her own breath. But the silence held. Then came it, the sound of breathing, not hers, slow, wet and steady, drawn through a throat thick with cold air. Each breath echoed faintly, circling closer. Martha's knees went weak. She turned slowly, her boots scraping against the wooden floor. Her trembling fingers found the small flint at her belt. Once, twice. Sparks flared and died. On the third strike, the lantern caught, a faint, trembling glow, and in that flickering light, she saw him. A man stood only a few steps away, half lost in shadow near the long table. His clothes were old and torn, his skin pale as milk. His eyes shimmered faintly in the lantern's glow, though they had no pupils, only two endless circles of dull silver, like coins left in the cold. He didn't speak. He only tilted his head, studying her with quiet curiosity. Martha took a shaky step back, her breath short and uneven. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man's lips twitched upward, forming a faint, unnatural smile. His teeth were small and too perfect, like they'd been carved from bone. "Not who," he murmured, his voice soft as wind moving through dry leaves. "When?" Before Martha could respond, every candle in the hall flared to life at once, brilliant, white and silent. The room, which had been empty moments before, was suddenly filled with people, dozens of them, each one seated perfectly still at the feast table, each one pale as snow, each with the same hollow silver eyes. The lantern shook in Martha's trembling hands, its weak flame struggling against the fierce glow of the candles. The hall had changed completely. The long table, once littered with crumbs and spilled cider, now gleamed with a full, untouched banquet. Roasted meats, glazed apples, sweet bread, steaming bowls of vegetables. Everything looked perfect, yet not a single bite had been taken. Around the table sat the guests, men, women, even children, frozen mid-motion. Some with hands raised in a silent toast, others with forks suspended over plates. Their silver eyes reflected the flickering candlelight like tiny mirrors. Not one blinked, not one breathed. The smell of wax and old wood mingled with the rich, impossible scent of the feast. Martha stepped closer, her boots tapping softly on the boards. The closer she came, the more she noticed. A young girl, holding a carved pumpkin, its grin twisted and hollow. A man frozen mid-bite. A woman's fingers resting on bread, her nails too pale, too long. The man with silver eyes stood at the head of the table, his movements slow and deliberate. He raised a hand in greeting, his eerie smile never fading. "Welcome," he said softly, "to the feast of those who walk between." Martha's lips parted. "Walk between," she breathed. He inclined his head toward the guests. "Tonight, the veil is thin. The living may meet the others. Some come by choice, some by accident, but all are invited. And now, so are you. A chill crept up her spine. The silver-eyed guests seemed to watch her without moving, their stillness heavier than silence. The candles flickered in rhythm, casting long skeletal shadows that danced across the walls. She tried to step back, but her feet wouldn't move, anchored as if the floor itself held her captive. "Do not fear," the man whispered. "You are not alone. You have been chosen." As his words drifted through the room, the doors behind her closed with a deep, echoing creak. Martha hadn't touched them. The sound rolled through the hall like a bell tolling at a funeral. Her body trembled, but she couldn't look away. The still figures around the table hadn't moved, yet their presence pressed against her like a cold wind. The air itself seemed alive. The man stepped closer, his boots making no sound. "Tonight," he murmured, "you may join, or simply observe. But choose carefully. Once you sit, there is no turning back until dawn." Martha swallowed, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. Her eyes darted across the table, the perfect plates, the glistening food, the way the apples seemed to gleam with warmth. For a brief, desperate moment, she imagined taking a bite, how the sweetness might melt on her tongue, how the warmth might chase away the chill creeping through her veins. But those eyes, so many pairs of them, watching, waiting. She turned, searching for a way out, but the doors were sealed tight. Even the moonlight through the windows had dimmed, smothered by a strange rolling mist. It was as if the forest itself had followed her inside. The man's voice drifted through the air like smoke. "Many have walked this path before you. Some never leave, others return, though few believe their stories." He took another step forward, his face calm, timeless. "Will you take a seat, Martha Ellery? Will you join the ritual of this night?" Her heart pounded against her ribs. She clutched her shawl tighter, thinking of her father, of the warm glow of their hearth, of safety and light. But another feeling stirred in her, a strange pull, something deep and ancient that whispered, "Stay." The candles bent toward her, their flames leaning as if the air itself urged her forward. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a quiet voice spoke. "Observe first. Do not fear. The night is longer than you think." Martha exhaled shakily and took a step, then another. The silver-eyed man extended his hand toward an empty chair. Slowly, almost against her will, she moved toward it. The lantern's light flickered wildly, casting long, shifting shadows that crawled across the walls. The closer she came, the heavier the air grew, warm but stifling, thick like a cellar long sealed from the world. The chair before her was carved from dark oak, the patterns etched into it intricate and strange. At first they looked like decorations, but when she leaned closer, she saw that they were symbols, circles and lines intertwining like constellations or forgotten words. Her hand hovered above the backrest. The wood felt cold, yet alive. A faint whisper brushed against her fingers, soft as breath through moss. "Sit and see." Her stomach tightened. The scent of roasted meat and sweet bread filled her nose again, intoxicating, irresistible. She couldn't tell if it was hunger or dread twisting inside her. With trembling hands, she pulled the chair slightly back and sat down. The wood was smooth beneath her palms, grounding but strange, humming faintly under her touch. A shiver ran up her spine, a warmth like sunlight breaking through fog, threaded with the chill of the unseen. Across the table the pale figures sat motionless, but the air around them vibrated softly, like the low hum of something ancient awakening. The man's voice broke the stillness. "Good," he said quietly. "You have taken the first step. Most never do." Martha looked around the table. Though none of the guests moved, she could feel their attention, gentle, heavy, expectant. Then she heard it, the faint clinking of cutlery, a sound no living hand seemed to make. Plates shifted slightly. The feast shimmered under the light as if it breathed, as though the food itself waited for her. The hall glowed with a strange golden haze. Martha's fear dulled into something else, something closer to awe. She realized she was standing at the edge of something beyond the living world, a place where secrets breathed between heartbeats. The candle flames swayed together, exhaling a single quiet sigh that seemed to fill the hall. And for the first time, Martha understood this was not a meal. It was a threshold, and the night was just beginning to speak. The roasted meat gave off a soft warmth, its aroma drifting lazily through the candlelit hall. Steam curled from the bowls in slow spirals, catching the light as if dancing for the room itself. She reached out hesitantly and lifted a small slice of bread from the nearest plate. It was soft, too soft, and smelled faintly of honey and cinnamon. When she brought it to her lips, the flavor bloomed at once, warm, sweet, comforting. But underneath that sweetness was something else, a trace of smoke like a long-dead fire, and a faint tang of iron that lingered at the back of her tongue. As she chewed slowly, the whispers began. Not words at first, just a low hum, like wind through dry leaves. Then clearer, distinct. "Remember the first step. Do not fear the eyes." Her gaze flicked toward the silver-eyed figures around the table. They sat motionless, unblinking, utterly silent. And yet, she was certain now. They were listening. The murmurs were part of the ritual. The feast itself seemed alive. Each dish offered not just food, but a fragment of story, a memory, a warning whispered from another age. Martha's fingers trembled as she reached for a slice of apple, its skin gleaming under the candlelight. She bit into it. The juice spilled down her chin, sweet and sharp. She swallowed slowly, letting the flavor linger. It was as though the apple carried the breath of autumn itself, and yet beneath that warmth she felt a creeping chill reminding her she was far from home and far from the living. A movement caught her eye. The man at the head of the table made the slightest gesture, his body still, his hand tilting toward the nearest figure. The silver-eyed guests shifted, almost imperceptibly, leaning toward one another as if acknowledging her presence, but never breaking their stillness. The hall seemed to breathe with them. Whispers, warmth, shadows moving in rhythm, pulsing with the heartbeat of the night. Slow, patient, mesmerizing. Then, from the corner, a shadow loosened itself from the wall. A small, pale child stepped forward. Martha froze. The child couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, wearing a tattered colonial dress. Her tangled hair was pale as frost, and her eyes, silver like the others, reflected the candlelight with quiet curiosity. But there was softness there too, a gentleness that set her apart. She smiled faintly, the curve of her lips flickering like a candle flame in the dark. The child stopped beside Martha's chair. For a moment, the hall fell utterly silent. Even the whispers of the feast seemed to hold their breath. "You're not afraid?" the child asked. Her voice was soft, melodic, yet it echoed strangely, as though it came from everywhere at once. Martha swallowed hard. I don't know," she stammered. Her fingers tightened around the lantern handle. "I've never seen anything like this before." The child tilted her head. "Most are. That's why they leave." But you came here. That means something. She extended a small translucent hand. Sit with me. Learn the feast. Martha hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the silent guests. Their stillness no longer felt hostile, only watchful. The warmth of the food, the murmuring air, the soft hum of unseen voices, it all seemed to beckon her closer. Slowly, she slid her chair toward the child. The little girl's hand hovered near the bread, guiding her without touch. A calm settled over Martha, quiet but steady. The fear that had chased her through the woods melted into cautious wonder. "Do you know who they are?" she asked, nodding toward the silver-eyed guests. "They were like you once," the child whispered. "Curious, brave. Some stayed, some left." Her voice softened. "Tonight, you'll learn why. But first, you must taste, listen, and remember. Every bite has a story." Martha nodded, her pulse quickening. She lifted a small piece of bread, feeling a tremor run down her spine. Not fear this time, but anticipation. Outside, wind rustled through the trees, brushing softly against the windows. Inside, the hall glowed with warmth and shadow, the rhythm of the feast pulsing steady and alive. She brought the bread to her lips again. The flavor unfolded, gentle, warm, sweet. But as she chewed, new layers revealed themselves. The faint smoke of an old hearth, the metallic tang of iron, the bitter edge of forgotten herbs. Each taste carried a fragment of memory, as if the food itself remembered the hands that once broke it. The child watched her closely. Her silver eyes glimmered with a knowing light. "Every bite tells a story," she whispered. "Listen, not with your ears, but with everything you are. Feel it." Martha took another bite, slower this time. The room shifted. The whispers grew clearer, voices overlapping, some urgent, some mournful. At the far end of the table, a woman lifted her hand as if to beckon someone closer, but froze mid-motion, suspended in time. The air thickened with scent and sound. The roasted meat smelled of pine smoke and frost. The apples carried the wet sweetness of autumn rain. Even the cider seemed to hum, as though it held the laughter and tears of those who once drank it. Martha closed her eyes, letting the sensations wash over her. Each taste was a thread, weaving a tapestry of lost nights, whispered warnings, acts of courage and fear. The feast was alive, responding to her presence. The child leaned closer. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "The past reaching out?" "That's why they stay," she continued softly. "The ones who do not move. They are bound to the stories, waiting for someone to listen." A shiver ran through Martha, part awe, part chill. The fear that had haunted her since the path through the woods, the knocks, the hanging figure, seemed to converge here in this moment. The feast was a bridge, between the living and the lost, between history and memory. And she was standing at its edge. The whispers swelled gently, soothing but insistent. The candles flickered. The air itself seemed to breathe, drawing her deeper into the mystery of this Halloween night somewhere in Colonial America. Martha looked up. The shadows along the walls moved like ink through water, shifting with purpose. The silver-eyed guests stayed still, but in the corners, just beyond the light, she caught fleeting glimpses of something more, echoes of other nights, other feasts, other souls. Then the child spoke again, her voice clear, ancient, and tender. "They are the stories," the child whispered. "The ones who remain are bound to them. Every shadow hides a memory, a choice, a moment of courage or fear. Watch closely, and you'll see." Martha's eyes widened as the corner near the hearth began to shimmer. A faint image materialized, like smoke taking form. A young girl running through a forest, clutching a bundle of herbs. Her face glowed with determination, yet her eyes betrayed fear. Martha could feel it. The damp leaves beneath her feet, the sting of cold air on her skin, the sharp snap of twigs breaking underfoot. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the vision dissolved, replaced by another. A man knelt in the snow, his hands clasped over a small child, whispering prayers for warmth and protection. The chill of his breath seemed to seep into Martha's chest. She felt the sting of frozen tears on her own cheeks. The whispers around the table rose softly, weaving through each image like silk threads. Martha understood. They were telling stories, fragments of lives preserved in moments of triumph, tragedy, and quiet bravery. Each bite of the feast had unlocked another layer of memory. The child watched her, calm and knowing. "Do you understand now?" she asked. "This is why we remain. The stories never end. We cannot move on until someone remembers, until someone listens." Martha nodded slowly, tracing the edge of the bread she'd set down. Her fear had melted into a heavy, aching wonder. She felt both present and distant, as if she existed halfway between the living and the memory of the feast itself. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, brushing the windows like the touch of unseen hands. Inside, the hall pulsed with echoes of the past, each shadow waiting patiently to be remembered. The silence deepened into a rhythm of its own, broken only by faint murmurs and the delicate clink of invisible silverware. Martha felt herself sinking into the stillness, the room breathing slow and steady, like a heartbeat centuries old. Every breath she took seemed to carry the weight of history. Every flicker of candlelight whispered of lives long gone. The child leaned close, her presence a small pocket of warmth amid the cool shadows. "The greatest stories are not told with words," she said softly. "They live in silence, in what's done, in the choices made when no one is watching." Martha's gaze drifted around the table, seeing details she'd missed before. The silver-eyed guests were frozen mid-motion, caught in the act of living. A man's cup hovered mid-air, tilted just so. A woman's knife paused mid-slice above a loaf of bread. A child's hand reached for a candle, trembling slightly. It dawned on her. Each suspended gesture was a memory, a decision preserved in time. The feast was a gallery of choices, moments of humanity captured and held by shadow and light. The whispers weren't meant to frighten her. They were guiding her, teaching her how to see, to feel, to remember. Her hand trembled as she touched the table's edge. The wood was smooth, almost warm, pulsing faintly with energy. The stories seemed to hum beneath her fingertips, alive, insistent, eternal. "Don't speak too soon," the child murmured near her ear. "Don't act without thought. Observe. Let the stories unfold. Only then will you understand." Martha closed her eyes and let the silence wash over her. The rustle of unseen movement, the scent of roasted meat and warm bread, the golden glow of candlelight, it all merged into one living moment. The hall itself seemed to breathe, teaching her the quiet lessons of the night. He inclined his head toward the guests. "Tonight, the veil is thin. The living may meet the others. Some come by choice, some by accident, but all are invited. And now, so are you." A chill crept up her spine. The silver-eyed guests seemed to watch her without moving, their stillness heavier than silence. The candles flickered in rhythm, casting long skeletal shadows that danced across the walls. She tried to step back, but her feet wouldn't move, anchored as if the floor itself held her captive. "Do not fear," the man whispered. "You are not alone. You have been chosen." As his words drifted through the room, the doors behind her closed with a deep, echoing creak. Martha hadn't touched them. The sound rolled through the hall like a bell tolling at a funeral. Her body trembled, but she couldn't look away. The still figures around the table hadn't moved, yet their presence pressed against her like a cold wind. The air itself seemed alive. The man stepped closer, his boots making no sound. "Tonight," he murmured, "you may join, or simply observe. But choose carefully. Once you sit, there is no turning back until dawn." Martha swallowed, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. Her eyes darted across the table, the perfect plates, the glistening food, the way the apples seemed to gleam with warmth. For a brief, desperate moment, she imagined taking a bite, how the sweetness might melt on her tongue, how the warmth might chase away the chill creeping through her veins. But those eyes, so many pairs of them, watching, waiting. She turned, searching for a way out, but the doors were sealed tight. Even the moonlight through the windows had dimmed, smothered by a strange rolling mist. It was as if the forest itself had followed her inside. The man's voice drifted through the air like smoke. "Many have walked this path before you. Some never leave, others return, though few believe their stories." He took another step forward, his face calm, timeless. "Will you take a seat, Martha Ellery? Will you join the ritual of this night?" Her heart pounded against her ribs. She clutched her shawl tighter, thinking of her father, of the warm glow of their hearth, of safety and light. But another feeling stirred in her, a strange pull, something deep and ancient that whispered, "Stay." The candles bent toward her, their flames leaning as if the air itself urged her forward. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a quiet voice spoke. "Observe first. Do not fear. The night is longer than you think." Martha exhaled shakily and took a step, then another. The silver-eyed man extended his hand toward an empty chair. Slowly, almost against her will, she moved toward it. The lantern's light flickered wildly, casting long, shifting shadows that crawled across the walls. The closer she came, the heavier the air grew, warm but stifling, thick like a cellar long sealed from the world. The chair before her was carved from dark oak, the patterns etched into it intricate and strange. At first they looked like decorations, but when she leaned closer, she saw that they were symbols, circles and lines intertwining like constellations or forgotten words. Her hand hovered above the backrest. The wood felt cold, yet alive. A faint whisper brushed against her fingers, soft as breath through moss. "Sit and see." Her stomach tightened. The scent of roasted meat and sweet bread filled her nose again, intoxicating, irresistible. She couldn't tell if it was hunger or dread twisting inside her. With trembling hands, she pulled the chair slightly back and sat down. The wood was smooth beneath her palms, grounding but strange, humming faintly under her touch. A shiver ran up her spine, a warmth, like sunlight breaking through fog, threaded with the chill of the unseen. Across the table, the pale figures sat motionless, but the air around them vibrated softly, like the low hum of something ancient awakening. The man's voice broke the stillness. "Good," he said quietly. "You have taken the first step. Most never do." Martha looked around the table. Though none of the guests moved, she could feel their attention, gentle, heavy, expectant. Then she heard it, the faint clinking of cutlery, a sound no living hand seemed to make. Plates shifted slightly. The feast shimmered under the light as if it breathed, as though the food itself waited for her. The hall glowed with a strange golden haze. Martha's fear dulled into something else, something closer to awe. She realized she was standing at the edge of something beyond the living world, a place where secrets breathed between heartbeats. The candle flames swayed together, exhaling a single quiet sigh that seemed to fill the hall, and for the first time Martha understood. This was not a meal, it was a threshold, and the night was just beginning to speak. The roasted meat gave off a soft warmth, its aroma drifting lazily through the candlelit hall. Steam curled from the bowls in slow spirals, catching the light as if dancing for the room itself. She reached out hesitantly and lifted a small slice of bread from the nearest plate. It was soft, too soft, and smelled faintly of honey and cinnamon. When she brought it to her lips, the flavor bloomed at once, warm, sweet, comforting. But underneath that sweetness was something else, a trace of smoke, like a long dead fire, and a faint tang of iron that lingered at the back of her tongue. As she chewed slowly, the whispers began, not words at first, just a low hum, like wind through dry leaves, then clearer, distinct. Remember the first step. Do not fear the eyes. Her gaze flicked toward the silver-eyed figures around the table. They sat, motionless, unblinking, utterly silent. And yet, she was certain now, they were listening. The murmurs were part of the ritual. The feast itself seemed alive. Each dish offered not just food, but a fragment of story, a memory, a warning whispered from another age. Martha's fingers trembled as she reached for a slice of apple, its skin gleaming under the candlelight. She bit into it. The juice spilled down her chin, sweet and sharp. She swallowed slowly, letting the flavor linger. It was as though the apple carried the breath of autumn itself, and yet beneath that warmth she felt a creeping chill reminding her she was far from home and far from the living. A movement caught her eye. The man at the head of the table made the slightest gesture, his body still, his hand tilting toward the nearest figure. The silver-eyed guests shifted, almost imperceptibly, leaning toward one another as if acknowledging her presence, but never breaking their stillness. The hall seemed to breathe with them. Whispers, warmth, shadows moving in rhythm, pulsing with the heartbeat of the night, slow, patient, mesmerizing. Then, from the corner, a shadow loosened itself from the wall. A small, pale child stepped forward. Martha froze. The child couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, wearing a tattered colonial dress. Her tangled hair was pale as frost, and her eyes, silver like the others, reflected the candlelight with quiet curiosity. But there was softness there too, a gentleness that set her apart. She smiled faintly, the curve of her lips flickering like a candle flame in the dark. The child stopped beside Martha's chair. Outside, the wind whispered through bare branches, a haunting harmony to the feast of shadows. Inside, Martha felt herself surrendering to the rhythm of the night, a witness to centuries of memory suspended in the glow of flickering light. When she opened her eyes again, the hall shimmered. The candles danced, their flames stretching the shadows of the silver-eyed guests across the walls, making them sway as if alive. Each flicker beat like a slow pulse guiding her deeper. The child stood beside her, raising a small hand toward the nearest candle. "The light will show you what words cannot," she whispered. "Follow it, and you'll see the truths hidden in the dark." Martha leaned closer, letting the candle's warmth bathe her fingers. The wax was soft and smooth, the flame alive with delicate motion. As she watched, the shadows around it began to shift, not menacingly, but with purpose, revealing glimpses of other lives. A man crouched by a fire, sharpening a tool, his face lit by the glow of the flames. She could almost smell the smoke, feel the dry heat against her skin. Across the room, a woman arranged herbs in a basket, the faint scent of lavender and rosemary filling the air, lingering as though the centuries themselves refused to let it fade. The child's voice guided her gently. Every shadow, every flame tells a story. Look closely, feel deeply. The veil is thin tonight. If you learn, you can carry it forward. Martha reached toward another candle. Its flame bent slightly, as if bowing to her hand. Another vision shimmered into being, a boy carrying a lantern through a fog-draped field, herding geese with trembling hands. She could feel the chill of dawn, the brush of feathers against her palms, the quiet pride of a small, unseen victory. The hall hummed faintly, leading her from shadow to shadow, memory to memory. Each flame revealed a fragment of another life, waiting to be witnessed. Breathing slowly, Martha let the candlelight lead her deeper. The night seemed to wrap around her like a teacher, quiet, patient, and infinite. Her gaze followed the flickering light as it glided across the walls, unveiling echoes of past lives suspended mid-motion. The child walked beside her in silence, pointing gently toward the hidden corners of the room. From near the hearth, a soft murmur rose, barely audible, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Martha leaned closer, and words began to form. I once left my brother behind. A vision unfolded before her. A boy, no older than 10, huddled in the corner of a cold barn. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. The air filled with the smell of hay, damp stone, and fear. In the flickering light, she felt his trembling hands, his shallow breaths, the distant sound of a boot scraping across the floor. Somewhere beyond, another child sobbed softly. Smoke drifted from a fire just out of sight. Every sense came alive. Martha was tethered to the boy's moment, feeling his sorrow as her own. The child beside her spoke again, voice low and steady. Not all who remain are lost. Some wait to be remembered, to have their moments honored, their fears seen. Martha touched the edge of her plate. The bread she had eaten earlier still lingered on her tongue, but now it carried the faint bitterness of grief. She understood now. This was more than a feast. It was a library of souls, a cathedral of memory preserved in shadow, waiting for the living to bear witness. Outside, the wind sighed against the windows, echoing the stories she had just seen. Inside, the candlelight pulsed softly, urging her forward, to see, to learn, to remember. As she took another slow bite from her plate, Martha felt herself step even deeper into the delicate weave of memory and night. Her eyes lifted to the silver-eyed guests once more. Though still as statues, their presence felt alive, charged with quiet awareness. The candlelight reflected in their eyes like tiny mirrors, holding centuries of secrets and longing. The child leaned closer, her voice soft as wings brushing the air. Do not fear their gaze. They watch not to harm, but to guide. Each one carries a story. Each one waits for a witness. A shiver passed through Martha, but beneath it was something gentler, a strange comfort. She realized the eyes were not empty at all. They were full of memory, of longing, of lives long past. And when she looked closer, she could see fragments flickering within them. A mother rocking a cradle in a dim-lit room, the scent of lavender and linen thick in the air. A blacksmith bent over his forge, the glow of molten iron lighting his face. The feast continued to breathe, and Martha began to understand. She was not merely a guest. She was the listener they had been waiting for. The heat pressed gently against her skin. She could still hear the laughter of children running through the autumn fields, their footsteps echoing faintly somewhere in the distance. Each vision came and went in flashes, fleeting, fragile, dissolving back into the shadows. Yet Martha could still feel them long after they vanished, their warmth, their fear, their joy, their sorrow. It was then she began to understand. These were not apparitions meant to frighten her. They were living echoes, holding the essence of lives once lived, once loved, once lost. The child's voice whispered again, urging her softly, "Focus on one. Let it speak to you." Martha obeyed. Her gaze settled on a woman at the far end of the table, hands hovering over a loaf of bread. The moment deepened, unfolding before her eyes. The woman now knelt on a cold wooden floor in her own cottage long ago, fingers clasped in prayer for her family's safety as a storm raged outside. Martha could feel the chill of that wind, the flicker of candlelight against damp walls, the rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't her own. The whole room seemed to pulse with that rhythm, the air alive with memory. And in that realization, Martha felt the boundary blur. She was no longer merely a guest. She was part of the moment, breathing inside the memory, witnessing the past as if it were her own. Outside, the wind brushed over the sleeping village, carrying the ghostly echo of footsteps long faded. Inside, the silver-eyed figures remained still, their faces calm, almost reverent. They no longer frightened her. They invited her to see, to listen, to remember. A soft draught moved through the hall, bringing with it the scent of fallen leaves, damp earth, and distant smoke from unseen fires. Martha breathed it in slowly, letting the fragrance anchor her in the present, even as the past shimmered all around her. The feast, the shadows, the spectral guests, they all seemed to exhale together, the air humming with the rhythm of memory and night. The child pointed toward the window, where pale moonlight stretched across the floor in long silver ribbons. "Autumn always breathes life into the old stories," she whispered. "The air carries them. Listen, and you'll feel them." Martha's eyes followed the light and caught a faint shimmer near the hearth. Slowly, an image began to form. A family walking through a misty field with lanterns in hand, leaves crunching beneath their boots. She could smell the cold bite of frost, hear the soft laughter of children, and feel the uneven ground beneath her feet. The whispers at the table rose faintly, guiding her attention deeper into the vision. The warmth of candlelight mingled with the crisp chill of autumn air, creating a fragile balance, comfort and unease dancing together. Martha realized she could sense the passage of time itself, the invisible layers of lives once lived, each leaving behind its faint imprint on the hall, on the feast, on the air itself. The child tilted her head, watching Martha closely. "Do you see how they move, even in stillness?" she murmured. "Life always leaves traces, in breath, in scent, in the smallest movement. The silver-eyed ones wait for someone to feel it, to honor it." Martha nodded. She let the sensations wash through her, the cool whisper of the wind through the cracked window, the warmth of the candles brushing her hands, the quiet pulse of unseen life thrumming in the darkness. The night itself was teaching her, revealing the secret language of the past, a story told not in words, but through the gentle persistence of memory. And as the hall seemed to breathe alongside her, Martha felt something shift deep within, a calm connection, a tether between herself, the feast, and the countless lives woven into the silver thread of the night. She shifted in her chair, leaning closer to the nearest candle. The heat brushed her fingers as she watched the flame bend and dance, casting looping patterns along the wooden walls. Each flicker felt deliberate, as if the light itself were alive, weaving stories out of shadow. "The flames remember," the child whispered beside her. "They keep fragments of every night, every moment that's ever passed through this place." Watch closely, and you'll see Martha's eyes followed the trembling glow, and slowly, Shapes began to emerge. A man knelt beside a table, pouring cider for weary companions. She could smell the sweetness of the apples, hear the low murmur of their voices, feel the warmth of the hearth at their backs. Another flicker revealed a young girl, hunched over a small book, her hands trembling with excitement as the faint scent of ink and parchment filled the air. Each vision passed like a heartbeat, fleeting, yet vividly alive. Martha could feel every emotion carried in the light: hope, fear, love, longing, all pulsing through her as if they'd been waiting for her to listen. The hall itself seemed to move in time with these memories, the silver-eyed guests leaning ever so slightly toward the fire, drawn by its warmth and its stories. "Don't rush," the child murmured, her voice soft as breath. "Let the stories come on their own. The hall will open when it's ready. Every flame holds a lesson, a memory waiting for you to touch it with your heart." Martha inhaled deeply, letting the sounds, scents, and flickering warmth surround her. The world beyond these walls faded, the trees, the wind, the sleeping village, until only the gentle heartbeat of the candles remained. Suspended in the balance between shadow and flame, she began to understand how to listen to the past with senses she never knew she had. When she reached out, her fingers hovering just above the nearest candle, she felt a warmth unlike anything before. Not fire, but connection. The tremor in her chest softened, replaced by something vast and reverent. And then, as she lingered in that stillness, something subtle began to change. A delicate silver glow rippled along the edges of the shadows, threading through the room like spun light. It shimmered softly, weaving through the guests, the table, the walls, even the lantern in her own hand. "That is the thread of memory," the child breathed. "Every life, every fear, every choice, all of it leaves a trace. The veil is thin tonight, and you can see it because you are meant to. Follow it, and it will guide you." Martha's eyes widened as the luminous thread pulsed softly, winding through the room, linking each figure, curling around plates and cups before stretching toward her fingers. She could feel its vibration in the air, like the faint pluck of a harp string echoing through her bones. Along the thread, a new scene appeared. A man kneeling in frost just beyond the village, gathering herbs in the pale morning light. She could feel the cold bite against his skin, smell the sharp sweetness of crushed leaves, hear the brittle crunch of ice beneath his boots. Another shimmer revealed a mother whispering to her sleeping child, her voice low and tender, her hands gentle and warm. Martha could feel that love bloom inside her chest, as though it were her own. "The thread connects them all," said the child softly. "It's the lifeline of their stories, and tonight it's reaching for you. You're meant to carry a piece of each one, even when you leave this place." Martha's hands trembled as she reached toward the glowing line. Peace washed over her, deep and still. The fear that once filled her when she first stepped into the hall had melted into something sacred, awe, reverence, and the quiet knowledge that she was no longer alone. The silver thread wasn't just light, it was guidance, memory and meaning intertwined, a quiet current of understanding running through the dark. As the candle flames swayed above her, the entire hall seemed to sigh, a deep, settling sound that wrapped around Martha like a warm cloak. She sensed, somehow, that she had stepped into something vast, a story unfolding slowly, layer by layer, through the long breath of the night. Her gaze followed the silver thread as it wove its faint glow across the hall. Then, a sound brushed her ears, soft, distant, and real. Laughter, not sharp or echoing, but light and playful, like wind rustling through dry autumn leaves. Her heart leapt. It was the first true sound of life she'd heard in the hall. The child's small hand rested on hers. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "They remember joy as well as sorrow. Even stillness keeps laughter. Follow it, and you'll see Martha turn toward the sound. In the far corner, near a window glinting with moonlight, the candlelight shimmered differently. There, a cluster of pale, silvery children, frozen mid-motion, playing silently in the corner. Yet the air around them seemed to pulse with their joy, faint ripples of warmth, like laughter too soft to hear but strong enough to feel. She could almost sense their giggles fully now, the rhythm of tiny feet brushing through fallen leaves, the tang of crushed apples beneath them, the sharp sweetness of autumn air. The child beside her nodded, urging her forward. "Even shadows hold light," she murmured. "Don't fear what stands still. It's alive in memory, alive in the heart of the night." Martha inhaled deeply, letting the echo of laughter blend with the candlelight, the warmth of the feast, and the hum of the silver thread. For the first time, fear melted from her chest, replaced by wonder, the feeling that she was walking through centuries of living memory, touching fragments of joy long forgotten, but never truly lost. As she stepped closer to the still children, the whispers around the table rose like a lullaby sung in pieces. The hall itself seemed to pulse softly, every heartbeat carrying echoes of lives once lived, memories cherished, joys remembered. And in that moment, Martha understood. Halloween night in colonial America had never been just a night of fear. It was remembrance, a bridge between the living and the gone, between those who still breathed and those who waited quietly to be remembered. Her eyes lifted to the windows, where moonlight mingled with the candle glow. Outside, the wind wound through bare branches, carrying the scents of wet leaves, cold soil, and distant wood smoke. The sound drifted into the hall like a quiet hymn, threading through the shadows. "The wind carries their voices," the child whispered beside her. "Those who walked these paths long ago. They speak through the rustling leaves, the creak of the trees, the sighs of the night." Martha closed her eyes, letting the sound surround her. She could hear them clearly now, a chorus of faint voices, some quick and restless, others soft and tender. Their murmurs wove together with the hum of the hall, the pulse of the silver thread, and the steady flicker of flame. It was a symphony of memory, stories of countless lives carried through the veil of time. Then, near the far end of the table, a shadow stirred. A figure knelt beside a small lantern, the faint glow revealing a carved pumpkin with a wide, crooked grin. Martha felt the chill of the night air against her skin, the roughness of the pumpkin's surface beneath unseen fingers, and the flicker of its candle flame casting wild shapes across the walls of some long-ago home. The child's eyes shimmered. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. "The stories live in the wind, in the shadows, in the feast. They reach out to those who listen, to those willing to carry them forward." Martha nodded slowly, her heart steady, her thoughts guided by the rhythm of the whispers. The night around her felt alive, breathing, patient, inviting. It pulled her deeper into its tapestry of lives, woven from candlelight and shadow and the silvery gaze of memory. As the wind's whispers mingled with the low hum of the hall, she began to understand. Every breath, every flicker, every sound was a story waiting to be heard. Her eyes fell to the floor. Faint impressions marked the wooden boards, as if invisible feet had just passed. The planks seemed to remember, echoing softly in the quiet. She could almost hear it, the light scuff of small boots brushing against the old wood. "The footsteps of those long gone never fade," the child's voice murmured near her ear. They don't walk to frighten you. They walk to guide you. Follow, and the hall will show what eyes alone cannot see. Martha raised her lantern higher. The light stretched across the walls, and the shadows rippled like water, shifting, curling, revealing fragments of movement. In the far corner, a woman appeared, carrying a basket of herbs freshly gathered from the fields. Each step was careful and sure. Martha could almost smell the sharp green scent rising from the basket, could feel the weight of it in her own hands. At the head of the table, the silver-eyed man's gaze caught hers. Though he didn't move, she could feel his attention, warm, watchful, like a teacher, quietly proud of his student's first steps into understanding. The child tapped lightly on the edge of a silver plate. "Watch the path," she said softly. "Every step tells a story. Every motion is remembered. Sometimes the smallest act carries the greatest truth." Martha's fingers brushed the silver thread glowing along the table's edge. She followed it, tracing its pulse as it wound through the air. She could feel it, the weight of decisions made long ago, the quiet courage of people who had endured fear, cold, and uncertainty. Each movement frozen in time, yet alive with meaning. Outside, the wind rattled gently against the windows, leaves whispering across the glass. Inside, the hall vibrated with life remembered, every sound, every shadow echoing through her heart. The rhythm of the Halloween night deepened, rich and endless. Then something caught her eye. Near the edge of the table, half hidden in shadow, lay a small wooden horse, worn smooth by years of touch, its paint faded but still faintly blue. Martha knelt, lifting it carefully. The grain was rough under her fingertips, the scent of old pine and varnish rising faintly from its surface. The child leaned closer, her eyes glowing with quiet tenderness. "Even the smallest things hold stories," she whispered. "Toys, letters, trinkets. They remember laughter, sorrow, and dreams. They keep what hearts once cherished." Martha turned the toy over in her hands. Suddenly, the air shimmered, and a vision bloomed. A child running through the bright autumn fields, laughing breathlessly, clutching the wooden horse as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Martha could feel the wind against the child's face, the scrape of dry leaves on small palms, the sweet tang of apples drifting from a nearby orchard. Around her, the silver-eyed guests stirred faintly, their presence deepening the moment. Martha understood now. They too had known love, joy, and tenderness. The little horse was not just a forgotten toy. It was a bridge, a piece of innocence preserved in the stillness of time. The child's whisper floated like a breath. "Do you feel it? The warmth, the joy. Remembering means more than seeing sorrow. It means feeling laughter too. That is why they remain. That is why the hall endures." Martha placed the tiny horse gently on the table beside her plate, its smooth edges glinting in the candlelight. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, letting the memory settle deep inside her. The hall hummed softly, a lullaby made of shadow and flame, of presence and history intertwined. It called her further in, inviting her to listen closer, to see more. Her gaze drifted toward the hearth. Smoke curled upward in lazy silver wisps, its warmth brushing her skin, even from across the room. The scent of burning wood mingled with the sweetness of roasted meat, honeyed bread, and spiced cider. Together they formed a tapestry of smells, comforting, nostalgic, and ancient all at once. The child tilted her head toward the fire, her voice low and full of meaning. "The heart of every home carries a story," she whispered. "Even when the people are gone, The warmth, the scent, the echo, they remain. Close your eyes, and you can still step inside. Martha inhaled deeply, and the hall around her seemed to fade away. In its place, she saw herself kneeling before a small, crackling fire in a humble colonial kitchen. She could feel the warmth radiating against her skin, the rough texture of the wooden floor beneath her knees, and the comforting hum of voices drifting softly from nearby rooms. A kettle hissed quietly, steam curling upward and carrying the faint scent of herbs and dried flowers. Before her, a mother tended the fire with careful, steady hands, humming a low tune as her children played nearby. The smell of smoke and baking bread wrapped around Martha, tender and familiar. She could almost taste the sweetness of cider simmering on the stove, feel the gentle tug of a small hand brushing against hers. The child's voice floated beside her, light as a whisper of wind. "Even the simplest moments are sacred," she said. "They teach patience, love, and resilience. Every hearth holds untold stories, waiting for someone to feel them." Martha opened her eyes. The hall shimmered softly in response. The silvery guests still stood motionless, yet she sensed something in their stillness. Approval, perhaps, or gratitude. Every flicker of candlelight, every slow-moving shadow across the walls seemed to honor what she had just witnessed. She breathed deeply again, letting the warmth of the hearth and the scent of home settle deep within her chest. The Halloween night in colonial America stretched endlessly around her, rich with stories of both sorrow and joy, each one waiting patiently to be seen, felt, and remembered. Then Martha heard a new sound. A faint, almost invisible melody drifted through the hall. No instrument played it, yet each note was clear and fragile, as if spun from moonlight itself. The sound wove through the flickering candles and the pale figures, wrapping gently around the air, as though the hall itself were singing. The child leaned close and whispered, "The night has its own music. It carries the joys and sorrows of those who lived here long ago. Listen closely, and you'll hear the heartbeat behind every memory." Martha closed her eyes and let the melody wash over her. She didn't just hear it. She felt it, thrumming softly within her chest, matching her heartbeat. Each note carried a memory. A mother rocking her child to sleep, a farmer returning home from the fields, children chasing one another through golden autumn leaves. The music was patient, tender, and alive, never rushed, never loud. The silvery guests seemed to sway gently in rhythm, as though moved by an unseen conductor. Even the candles danced in harmony, their flames bending toward the sound. Martha could feel everything: the fire's warmth, the scent of the feast, the faint echo of footsteps, all blending into one living symphony of memory and time. The child's hand brushed hers again. "Music carries what words cannot," she said softly. "Every life has its song. Tonight, you hear them all." Martha drew a long breath, letting the melody settle deep within her. She realized she was no longer just observing. She was part of it now, flowing with the rhythm of the hall itself. The Halloween night was alive with sound, shadow, and warmth, inviting her to listen with her whole being. As the music faded into a soft hum, Martha noticed something new: a door along the far wall. It was subtle, nearly invisible, but its edges glowed faintly with a pulse of silver light, like the heartbeat of the hall itself. She had never seen it before, yet it seemed to call her name. The child pointed toward it with a delicate hand. "Some doors only appear to those who truly listen," she whispered. "They lead to stories that are older, deeper, and gentler. This one is waiting for you." Martha stepped closer, the floorboards sighing under her feet. The air grew warmer, filled with the mingled scents of the feast, the hearth, and the faint breath of autumn outside. She could almost feel the air vibrating, alive, expectant. With trembling fingers, she reached out. The door's surface was smooth and faintly warm, pulsing lightly beneath her hand. A distant whisper drifted through the hall. "Step through. See what has been preserved. Remember?" Her heart raced, but the child's calm presence gave her courage. She imagined what lay beyond: more memories, more frozen lives, more stories waiting to be honored. The silver thread stretched toward the door, its glow brightening, urging her onward. Martha pressed gently, and the door creaked open. Beyond lay a narrow corridor, dimly lit by floating lanterns that glowed without chains or holders. The walls shimmered with moving shadows that whispered faintly as she passed. Every step echoed softly, not alone, but as part of a layered chorus of footsteps that had once walked the same path. The child followed quietly. "These echoes belong to those who came before," she murmured. "Every step, every voice carries a story. Listen closely, and you may hear their secrets." Martha paused, closing her eyes. The whispers grew clearer, a mother soothing her frightened child, the scratch of a quill against parchment, children laughing as they ran through a garden of fallen leaves. She could feel those moments, the roughness of paper beneath her fingers, the softness of a cotton dress, the crisp crunch of leaves underfoot. Though the corridor stretched endlessly, fear never touched her. Warmth surrounded her instead, like the embrace of a remembered home. Each shadow leaned slightly toward her as she walked, as though welcoming her, acknowledging her willingness to bear witness. The child's voice drifted again, soft as candle smoke. "Time folds here. Past and present meet, and the night remembers. You're walking not only through a corridor, but through the lives that built it. Every story has its place. Every memory waits for acknowledgement." Martha breathed deeply. The scent of wood, candle smoke, and distant earth filled her lungs. She realized the whispers were leading her, each one a thread toward a new understanding, deeper remembrance, and the heart of Halloween night itself. Step by step, the corridor pulsed gently around her, alive with history and warmth, its whispers inviting her to journey further. Martha lifted her lantern higher, its golden glow chasing the shifting shadows ahead, and walked deeper into the corridor of memory. The air grew richer with scent, a blend of burning pine, spiced cider, fresh-baked bread, and faint traces of wildflowers long past their season. Each breath drew her deeper into memory, connecting her to the unseen lives that had once walked this place. The corridor opened suddenly into a vast chamber, and Martha stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Before her stretched a hall of faces. The walls were lined with pale, luminous visages, faintly glowing, suspended in shadow. Some faces were joyful, eyes bright with laughter. Others were worn by worry or softened by sorrow. Each expression felt alive, watching her quietly, waiting for her recognition. The child stepped beside her, voice low and guiding. "Every face is a story. Look closely. See what they felt. Hear what they whispered in their time. These are the souls who linger, not out of malice, but because their stories still need a witness." Martha moved closer to the first face, that of a young woman with gentle features and silver eyes. As she approached, the air around her shimmered, and a vision blossomed like a living memory. The woman knelt by a hearth, hands folded in prayer, her voice soft as she asked for her family's safety through a stormy night. Martha felt the cold wind battering the house timbers, the fire's warmth brushing against her skin, and the mingled scent of burning pine and hanging herbs above. She even heard the distant cry of a wolf, sharp and haunting, a reminder of the untamed world beyond those walls. She stepped toward another face, an older man with eyes full of quiet wisdom. In an instant, she was inside a small workshop, surrounded by the glow of fire and the clang of effort. She felt the weight of a hammer in her hand, the heat of the forge, the rough calluses on her palms. The scent of hot iron and smoke filled her senses. The rhythm of the hammer against metal rang out, steady, deliberate, meditative, a song of persistence and pride. The child's voice drifted near her ear. Don't rush. Stay with each face, each memory. Let them live in your heart. That's how you honor them. That's how the night will remember you. Martha breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the warmth of candlelight, the iron tang of the forge, and the soft echoes of laughter. The hall of faces pulsed around her, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Each subtle heartbeat of light felt like an invitation to linger, to explore, to feel. Then she noticed it. The silver thread from the feast, faintly glowing along the floor, weaving its way ahead. It guided her deeper into the chamber's mystery. Every face she passed added another layer to the night, another color in an ever-growing tapestry of memory. Her fear had vanished completely, replaced by wonder, reverence, and the slow, soothing rhythm of discovery. Outside, wind sighed against the stone walls, carrying faint laughter and the distant tread of forgotten footsteps. Inside, Martha moved slowly, savoring everything, the textures, the scents, the gentle warmth, the heartbeat of the past echoing softly in the hall of faces. As she stepped further, she noticed faint strands of silver weaving between the visages, threads of light stretching across the walls and floor, some even brushing against her hands. They pulsed gently, like the rhythm of a living heartbeat, connecting every memory into one endless, breathing tapestry. The child spoke softly beside her. This is the tapestry of time. Each thread is a life, a choice, a moment that mattered. They linger here, waiting for someone to see them, to feel them, to honor them. Martha reached out, fingertips trembling as they touched one of the glowing strands. Instantly, another vision unfolded. A young boy trudged through a frost-covered field, lantern in hand, guiding his little sister home. Martha felt the sting of cold air against her cheeks, the crunch of frozen grass underfoot, and the smoky scent of distant hearths drifting through the night. She could feel his small shoulders tense with responsibility, the weight of care and the quiet courage that comes with it. Another thread glimmered beneath her touch, drawing her into a new scene, a family gathered around a candlelit table, sharing a simple meal. The aroma of roasted vegetables and sweet honeyed bread filled the room. Martha heard the murmur of gentle conversation, the soft clinking of utensils, the sighs of contentment as each person savored warmth, food, and belonging. The child's eyes glinted with quiet pride. Do you see? Every life leaves its mark, and every mark carries meaning. The tapestry isn't only what happened, it's what was felt, cherished, and remembered. Martha's fingers followed the silver threads as they intertwined, stories of joy and grief, courage and tenderness, all woven together in shimmering light. The hall itself seemed to hum in rhythm with her pulse, a gentle vibration of unity and life. Each heartbeat, a story. And with every touch, Martha felt herself becoming part of that living web. The air thickened with scent, the crisp chill of frost, the sweetness of baked bread, the smoky warmth of wood, and the faint perfume of autumn leaves pressed into time. The shadows around her shifted softly, pulsing with the same rhythm as the threads, guiding her eyes from one story to the next. Martha realized then that Halloween night in colonial America wasn't merely a bridge to the past. It was alive, a living tapestry she could touch, breathe, and understand. Each thread she followed taught her patience and reverence. the quiet strength of bearing witness. The tapestry stretched endlessly before her, inviting her to linger, to listen, to let the stories reveal themselves in their own gentle rhythm. Her eyes traced the glowing threads as they wound through faces and shadows, connecting memory to memory. Then one strand caught her attention, flickering faintly, as if calling for her. A shape emerged within the shadow it touched. A young girl seated quietly on the floor of a dimly lit room, threading tiny beads onto a string. The child beside Martha whispered, "Recognition is the key. Sometimes the past doesn't ask for action, only to be seen. Look closely, and they will open themselves to you." Martha focused on the girl. She could feel the smooth coolness of the beads beneath her fingers, the waxed thread gliding softly through them, the delicate scent of dried flowers in the air. The girl's movements were patient, deliberate, each bead threaded with quiet pride and purpose. As Martha watched, the vision widened. She saw the small wooden room around the child, the rough-hewn walls, the flickering candle on the windowsill, the simple trinkets placed lovingly on shelves. The air carried the faint smell of beeswax and herbs. She could hear the candle's gentle crackle and the soft rustle of the thread sliding between fingers. The child at her side spoke softly. "They wait to be seen, to be understood. When you recognize them, you give them life again. That is the power you hold." Martha felt a gentle shiver move through her, not from fear, but from connection. It struck her that recognition itself was an act of kindness, a fragile bridge between the living and those who came before. She no longer saw the past only with her eyes, but with her heart. The hall seemed to breathe with her awareness. The candlelight glowed warmer, the shadows softened, and the silver threads that webbed through the room pulsed faintly, almost as if they, too, acknowledged her presence. Every small detail, the slow rhythm of the girl's breath, the soft warmth of the candle across her hands, the quiet creak of old floorboards, seemed to invite Martha to stay, to witness, to truly feel the life still echoing within memory. She began to understand that Halloween in colonial America wasn't about fear or superstition. It was about remembrance, bearing witness, giving space to the lives that had once pulsed with warmth, love, and hope. The hall around her hummed with that awareness, alive with gentle energy and unspoken gratitude. Martha drew a slow, deep breath, letting the sensations settle into her bones, the flicker of the candles, the still air trembling with history, the steady pulse of the night wrapping her in its quiet rhythm. As she stepped further into the hall of faces, her senses opened fully. A faint sweetness drifted toward her on an invisible breeze, and she recognized it immediately. The scent of flowers pressed into memory, marigold, lavender, and the faint, earthy tang of old soil. It felt as though the gardens, once tended with love centuries ago, had left their imprint here, fragrant ghosts of care that refused to fade. The child's voice came softly beside her. "Gardens are patient places. They remember toil and tenderness. Breathe in their memory, and you'll understand those who once cherished them." Martha followed the scent to a shifting shadow along the wall. A vision unfurled, a young woman kneeling in rows of herbs and flowers under the pale light of dawn. Her small hands moved with quiet skill, gathering lavender and rosemary, the dew cool against her skin. Martha could feel the chill of early morning on her own cheeks, hear the rooster calling far off, and smell the faint smoke curling from a nearby chimney. The silver thread at her feet glowed softly, stretching from this woman to another shadow, another memory. Now a young boy appeared, watering a patch of marigolds. his fingers coated in soil, the faint perfume clinging to his sleeves. A mother nearby laid bunches of herbs on a wooden table to dry, inhaling their fragrance as she hummed a low tune. Each motion was deliberate, tender, and full of life, preserved perfectly within the memory of the hall. The child's voice whispered, "Even the smallest hands leave their mark. Gardens remember love, hope, and care, and so do we.